Welcome to Asian Like Me, presented by me, Dr. Sohee Jun, the podcast for the modern Asian woman redefining what it means to thrive. I've spent years navigating the complexities of culture, family expectations, and career ambitions. Here, we have real, unfiltered conversations with incredible women who are breaking barriers, charting their own paths, and owning their power. Together, we'll dive into the wins, the lessons, and the challenges we all face. And yeah, we'll laugh. We'll share stories and drop some actionable tips to help you crush it in your own way. This is your space to feel seen, heard, and inspired. Ready to rewrite the rules? Let's drop in. Israa, I have so many questions for you. So I want to thank you for making time to be on this podcast. I know you have a ton going on, so I'm really excited to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I'm glad we are making this happen.
Yeah. So for our listeners, Israa and I met at the California Conference for Women when we were both taking the stage, talking about the things that we are passionate about and that we talk about through our lived experience. So you were there to share insights from your book, Toxic Productivity: Reclaim Your Time and Emotional Energy in a World That Always Demands More. And I have a million questions around this. And
hmm
the first one I want to start with is, what is currently lighting you up?
Currently, I am in the midst of teaching myself how to roast a perfect chicken. And I keep trying to every Sunday try to do it in different ways, doing the twine, like actually tying it up versus not, different types of strategies to make it. I love cooking, and I feel like it's the only time I'm very immersed in the present moment, because my hands are busy, it's tactile, it's creative. I have music playing, I have a little snack tray. It's like a very restorative activity for me because it's not something I have to do. I do it by choice. I know that many women don't have this choice, so I don't want to say everybody should run out and cook. It's because I have the privilege. It's like I do it because I want to.
Yeah.
And so I want to get good at roasting the perfect chicken, and it's lighting me up because I'm getting better and better at it.
Okay, so why chicken? And also,
Mm.
I'm a visual thinker, so I'm like just visualizing you like wrapping the string around it.
I have to be honest, roasting a chicken is a two-person job in our home because I struggle with touching the raw chicken. So it's my partner who does the execution of touching and marinating. I'm more the person who crafts the ingredients together. Why chicken? That's a great question. I think a good roast chicken lasts you a week as lunches.
Yeah,
So I
see,
don't have to order out. I live in New York City. The culture here is very much eating out, ordering out, and delivery and all that stuff. And I was very wrapped up in that when I was working too much and just being too busy and like trying to do all the things. The thing that I wasn't doing was like nourishing myself with good quality food, because I would just default to picking up fast food or ordering something quick because I was just doing too many other things.
okay.
Part of me unlearning this like hustle mindset has been taking back some ownership of nourishing my body at my pace on my terms.
It's funny that you literally said what is on my post-it note and is stuck to my laptop as a reminder for me that I have aligned outcomes and slowly underline, because I intimately know what you're talking about, trying to do
Mhm.
all the hustle. And by the way, DoorDash was like my boyfriend. I think I gave away way too much money. And I'm
Yeah, it's expensive.
Yes, it is astronomically. And I think I shared with you when you and I were talking at the conference in February, I was like, I have three children. Like, the reality is that's a lot in and of itself. And even if you
Yeah.
have kids or not, the go-go hustle mentality and glamorization of that, it's ever pervasive. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're all trapped in it. And it just takes different forms. It can be workaholism. It can be like a helicopter parent. It can be a partner who is like completely enmeshed with their partner, like centering their partner in their life. Like this concept of hustle mindset actually can show up in every domain of your life. We just only think about it from like a work perspective.
Yeah. How did you come to this work? I'm deeply interested in, you're a psychotherapist, is that correct?
Yes, I'm a therapist. I'm not a
Yeah.
practicing therapist, so I'm a licensed therapist, but I work in digital health, mental health tech startups that are enabling mental health care through technology. So I work in that because I was a practicing therapist for 5 years, and I really felt like we need to create better systems and processes for people to access mental health care, especially when it's still in the preventable stage, through increasing access to education, coping skills, like making it more accessible effectively.
Mhm.
As therapists, like a lot of basic human emotional regulation and boundary setting, all of these things that are life skills has been gate kept behind therapy. So it's like important to like make that information available to people. So I use my clinical lens in helping build tech-enabled services for mental health services. And I know I do a lot of writing and mental health speaking because that's my mission. I want people to know this information. I don't want to have them wait until they get sick and then go through insurance and find a provider. Then it's too late. If we can prevent things, I would rather do that. And so my writing is an offshoot of that desire to give people skills. And so my book is very tactical. There's a lot of like things you can do and habits you can integrate into your day-to-day life. The reason I became interested in this topic is because I was struggling with feeling happy in my life,
Mhm.
even though I had gotten all of the things that were expected of me.
Oh, after my own heart. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm an Asian child of immigrants. So there was like this checklist that I had to go through in life, as many of us do, because that's what our parents expect from us. And you get the undergrad, you get the postgrad, you get the certifications, you get the marriage, right? You do all the things and you're this good girl. You are polite and are helpful to others, and you do all the things. And you're essentially promised that happiness is at the bottom of that checklist. Once you hit that last check, you're going to feel happy because you did all the things.
Yeah.
But what I was noticing in my early 30s is that I had done all the things, and yet there was this gap. People perceived me as very happy and stable and successful, but internally, I didn't feel that way. I felt unhappy and disconnected and unsuccessful. And so, as a therapist, like my first line of question is, am I depressed? Because I was feeling so disconnected from my life.
Yeah.
So, I did like a screening and then I talked to my doctor and I didn't really meet the criteria for it. So, then my next hypothesis was, okay, if it's not something inside me, then it's something about my environment. It's about outside me.
Yeah.
And so I started doing a lot of this like exploration about where I'm spending my time and like why I say yes to certain things, even though I don't want to, and what's compelling me. Just a lot of exploration. That exploration led me to a lot of research around social motivation learning and happiness theories and stuff like that. In that exploration phase of my life, what I noticed is the personal development or self help section in bookstores only gave you very behavioral like explanations to
It,
how you can feel better,
yeah, and too theoretical
right?
times. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was very much focused on habit change. If you go and you look at anything that's telling you how you should feel better about your life, it's all about do this and here's a hack and this is the system, which of course I also have in my book. But the foundation as a therapist, I know, is that you have to resolve the unresolved emotions that are driving you towards feeling unhappy or dissatisfied. I started thinking about what is really driving this behavior, and I uncovered a lot of emotions.
Mhm.
And so that's really the thesis of the book is unhealthy productivity in any domain of your life is driven by unresolved emotions that we don't want to face. Shame, guilt, perfectionism, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of being left behind,
Yeah.
comparing yourself to other people. Those are emotional dynamics that are driving us to do more, to be more, to say yes, to overcommit, to overfunction, to overachieve. And so that's how I landed in this work is how can we help people feel more empowered in confronting difficult emotions so
Yeah.
that they can have healthy productivity?
There's a lot of threads I want to pull there, which is, I say I entered into organizational psychology because of my innate curiosity about people and really myself and my inner workings, because growing up, there was a lot of trauma and chaos, and that formed my early experiences, which led into this work specifically with high achieving women, which takes all the forms that you just said. And I love that you talked about it. You're bringing this unique lens of your lived experience, which is also deeply interwoven with the Pakistani heritage. And I'm wondering, tell me about what in your upbringing, what was said, what did you pick up? Certainly there are values espoused. Tell me about that formed your way into therapy, the work of therapy, mental health.
Ooh, okay. Two-part question. Interesting. So I think when it comes to like my relationship, like I became a therapist, not necessarily because of anything that was happening in my family, but more as I was studying, I became more and more interested in human behavior because
Mhm.
I was double majoring in environmental studies and psychology because originally, like many millennial girls of the 90s, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And so I wanted to, yeah, and I wanted to, so I was very interested in conservation efforts. How do we change human behavior to get them to care about the environment? So that's how I got into psychology. But as I started learning more and more, and I was like, whoa, this is like really interesting. And so then I pursued postgraduate or whatever in psychology and counseling. But in terms of the piece around my relationship to productivity or being productive as an identity,
Mhm.
that definitely was something that I learned at home. My parents are well-meaning parents. Like, I can't necessarily say that they aggressively told me this or withheld love if I wasn't productive or getting good grades.
Huh.
But it was like a simmering, like, undercurrent in the family that you have to do well in school, like you must, and there's no other option. And you like idly sitting and chilling and not doing something was not really a part of my family's culture at all.
Mhm.
Growing up, I didn't really see my parents just laying on the couch.
Yeah.
If it was a day off, there was something happening. There was like, okay, we'll clear out the cabinets, or we'll like clean this like complicated carpet in the home, or there was some kind of productive behavior occurring.
Quote unquote
And
productive.
our
Yeah.
productive, you're not just sitting around. If you're watching stuff, we watched a lot of like educational Disney films and that kind of stuff. And so it was just like the culture was like, if you're resting, like you're doing something wrong.
Mm.
Things need to be done. And meanwhile, both my parents are immigrants and they are survivors of a war themselves. So, like, they got out of this difficult situation because they worked really hard. And it gave them this like incredible leg up so that they were able to move from South Asia to the Middle East to North America, right? And so that was also embedded in the mind. It's like you see your parents starting over, you're like, you got to hustle, you got to work hard to get what you want. And so it just crystallized as this idea in my head that I just have to constantly be doing something. If it's not academic, it's personal. If it's not personal, it's learning a new skill. If it's not learning a new skill, it's throwing elaborate dinner parties. Like, you just have to be doing something. And that is something I definitely still struggle with to this day.
No, same. I am also, just as you were sharing this, I was thinking to myself, like, what am I role modeling for my children? And
Mm,
in my home growing up, it wasn't stated. I love how you described that there was a simmering of the educational expectation, and that certainly was real in my upbringing. And it's funny,
mhm.
as a side note, most of the women I have on this podcast or people on this podcast are like, you know what, the immigrant and perfectionism thing really just hard to uncouple the thing, hard to uncouple that thing. And I'm like, yes, it's also
Mhm.
like part and parcel of that experience. So my parents worked probably two jobs because they were trying to make ends meet. So I think it was the what I saw them do, and that there must have been some association of guilt for me if I rested or didn't do something productive.
Yeah. Yeah, the guilt is really strong. And that's the one I hear about most commonly from people as well is if I sleep in on a weekend, I feel guilty. If I don't make the most of my weekend, I feel guilty. Like a lot of people have this productivity guilt right
Mhm.
now. If I'm not doing a side hustle because my other friends are doing it, I feel guilty. Guilt is a very pervasive emotion right now in our culture.
It is. And what is the interplay of that and social media? We have to talk about this. Like the pervasive
Yeah.
hustle.
Yeah, so social media essentially shows you, and this is like so cliche at this point. I wish there was a better way to say it, but it shows you someone's highlight reel, so you don't actually see the grind. You see the hustle, that you get like an overview of what the outcome of the hustle is, and nobody's showing you the entire grind or all of the rejections and this, that, and the other thing. So it makes things feel like a fairy tale where it's like everything is possible, where it is, things are possible, but like everything doesn't need to be possible for you. Like you don't actually have to do all the things somebody else is doing just
That's
because
it.
you might think you're able to. Yeah.
That's the point,
So
that you don't have to do it all.
yeah, and so it creates this like lack of discernment because we're like oversaturated with so much content and information that we don't really know what we want and what we need to pursue. And so there's just too much noise. And social media like really just makes it more confusing for you. So you don't have anything else to do except compare yourself to others.
There is a quote, and I'm forgetting the author of the book, where he said it's 10,000 hours of doing something to reach expertise or
Hmm.
achieve success around it. And in essence, social media just strips that part, the really juicy resilience building part of our
Hmm.
lives, and just puts it up there as though it's magical, to your point. And it is so cliche. One of the things that you posted, you have such a following talking about social media, and I know that you
Yeah.
put out a lot of posts, and this one really caught me. The secret loneliness of high achieving women. Unpack that a little bit more and the thinking behind posting this.
Yeah, high achieving women are very much valorized in our society, right? And the definition of a high achieving woman doesn't just extend to their work. And that's where like the gender expectation is so different. Like a high achieving man, the definition is boxed into his work, but a high achieving woman is like really good at everything at work, right? Like a quote, and I use this very sarcastically, she's a girl boss, right? But she's also like fantastic at home, and she's a perfect friend, and she picks people from the airport and drops off. Like she's just like this, like doing everything.
Mhm.
But the truth is, most women who are high achieving are struggling with their mental health, whether like it's high functioning anxiety or depression, and they feel extremely lonely. So they are around people. So they're surrounded by people, but they're not often supported by people. And so there is a lot of loneliness in that. But because we are so busy, we don't have time to deal with the loneliness. And oftentimes, as more time goes by, the overdoing and overfunctioning becomes a coping skill to deal with the loneliness. But there is this like dull disconnect inside.
That is so visual how you describe that, the dull loneliness. It's
Hmm.
palpable. Myself through, I call it the undoing of the learnings, both conscious, unconscious, societally, and just in every way that I've learned to be high achieving. And I'm undoing that for myself and the work that I do with my clients. And I know you do that too. It's very sneaky.
Hmm.
And I really don't even know what I'm trying to say, other than like you said earlier, it can be in all areas of your life. And for women in
Hmm.
particular, it is so, I think that's what I want to say about that.
Yeah.
I don't know, other than saying, how does one, if you recognize this about yourself, what is the way through?
There's multiple avenues you can take. And the reason I always share these is because sometimes like some things are just not accessible to people. If you recognize you're feeling this like disconnect, but you're not really in touch with your emotions, you're not going to magically become better at getting in touch with your emotions in order to undo something, right? So there's like multiple avenues you can take. One is an emotional assessment. Like that's one way, is to realize something is amiss and you feel disconnected. Sit down and ask yourself, what are the things you do that actually feed your energy versus drain your energy? And did you want to go to the thing and then you felt better after? Or did you not want to go to the thing and then you felt better? Or did you not want to go and then you felt worse after leaving? Getting this like audit in your awareness is really important.
Mhm.
That's one avenue. A second avenue is if you're not really into getting in touch with your emotions and trying to figure out why you're doing these things, you can just tactically make space in your calendar, because over functioning, overdoing often looks like a very stacked calendar.
Mm.
Not just at work, not just at work, but even after work. And even if you don't work, even if you're not like doing paid labor for another company, like let's say you are working to raise your children, your calendar is probably stacked, right? Is to do something I called like the Chanel rule, which is to remove one activity from your week. So if you're familiar, Coco Chanel has allegedly said that when you leave the house before going out, take off one piece of jewelry, because we tend to over put things when we're in the vacuum of our bathroom,
I had no
right?
idea she said this, and then now,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like a style tip, because when you're in the vacuum of your bathroom, the lighting is different, right? But when you step out into the real world, it can look very different. So she always said, take off one thing, one accessory.
mhm.
Same thing for your commitments. See if you can just say no to one thing every week. Take one commitment off. Can you give it to somebody else? Your partner, your sister, whoever.
Yeah,
If that's not possible for you and you're like, everything is important to me, then you can actually go like the creativity path. A lot of times we are over functioning and over committed because we are unfamiliar with the joy of unstructured time. I would challenge anyone to think, when was the last time you had unstructured time where you're not reading something, you're not listening to something, you're not watching something, you're not doing something, you're just existing, right? That doesn't happen very often, but that's our natural state. We're born that way. Children spend a lot of unstructured time with creativity.
Isra, I'm just like,
Um,
what does that even mean? I don't know. Look, I'm playing with this myself actually, and I'm like, okay, let's not turn on music. Let's just be. And I am taken to literally staring at the clouds and just what comes out about, and it's hard.
it's hard and it's horrifying, because then we're just stuck with our own thoughts.
Yeah.
But it's really important. So again, like if you can find a creative outlet in your week, that can be a really good gateway path into undoing some of this toxic productivity. So even if it's like taking up a new hobby, that doesn't have to take too much time or money. It could just be adult coloring pages, knitting something like the old-timey hobbies, because they actually had a very profound impact on our nervous system. And so, even if it's like just free writing, it doesn't have to be journaling, it could just be free writing, just something that you can tap creativity into. Puzzles are really great. Once a week, if you can find time to do that, can be your path into, whoa, like I feel so good and centered when I'm doing my puzzles
Yeah.
every Sunday morning for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
um then you'll be like, oh wait, I actually want to protect this, or oh, I want a little bit more of this feeling, like, and then it starts you on this path of questioning why you do things.
Oh, yeah, it does. This whole undoing of such ingrained ways of being that's very glamorized here in the US context. I love that you offer, and I imagine this is what your book is like, and I know it is like this, where there's reflections and questions that allow people to get really curious about themselves in a different way. And I love these steps because one of my clients who very high achieving, very ambitious, one of the things she said was like, man, if I just go from all the doing to nothing, like her system would like not be able to handle that. So this gradual entry into being with ourselves, I really love these. And by the way, the whole like the calendar stacking thing. So I know that part of this for me harkens back to atomic habits, like calendar stack and make your calendar work for you. And if that is our jam, then we can also, to your point, make it work for us to ease into being with ourselves and taking things off and not automatically filling it in with something.
Yeah, and protecting like self-care time, like, a meeting, I think, and again, many people have said this, I'm not the first person to say it, but if you see an empty slot on your calendar, you're more likely to give it away to someone. But if you actually create a little block in there that said Sunday morning, 9:45 a.m. to 10:15, I'm doing the New York Times crossword, and that's my weekly ritual. Or Wednesday, I have a massage, because maybe you do a lot of standing at your job, right? Or it's like reading time for me. What happens is we are very dependent on our calendars as a culture in North America. And so I'm sure this happens with your friend group as well. Like you're hanging out and like, we should do something. Everybody pulls out their calendars, right? So putting in your priorities for your own personal wellness are also just as important as putting in like your kid's soccer game or your friend's birthday. So I think we have to shift, we've decentered ourselves in this culture.
We have, yeah. It's one of the mantras I had more for myself as I had children and entered into that world where I said, look, I think children benefit from moms who feel balanced and happy. Like, not perfect balance. It's not about getting everything done, but more about if you feel full and you feel content and you're able to prioritize yourself on some level, even if it means just, hey, I'm going to take a walk for 30 minutes or I'm going to grab a shower, then the children benefit from that. So
Yeah.
I felt very much like I was fighting to have that time for myself in a world that tells you it's not important. Yeah. I think that I wanted to ask you more about the mental health, the tech space of mental health. Like, where is that? I'm very interested in that part where you said making it accessible. And you said something really nuanced about how mental health had been like it was
Yeah.
gate capped by therapists. Unravel that for me.
Yeah, and I don't mean any one individual therapist particularly, or that people are doing this maliciously. It was just our social cultural understanding of who gets access to what type of information. So there's a lot of things that are general human skills, like emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, conflict management, safety planning, even if you think about that. These are like regular things that people should know. But what was happening in times past is these things are not taught to people, right? I didn't grow up learning how to manage my emotions. Very few people do, right? Now you see it a little bit more. But what happens is things happen in life and you don't know how to manage your difficult emotions. And so you spiral and you end up in therapy, and then you go to therapy, and then you learn the simple skill of emotional regulation.
Mm.
Had you known that skill prior, then maybe you wouldn't have spiraled, right? Let's say you had a bad breakup and you don't really know how to deal with it, and spiraling, it's making you really upset and you don't know how to manage your feelings. You're like, okay, I should go to a therapist. You go to a therapist. They teach you very simple emotional regulation skills, then you feel better, you feel more empowered. And so there's a lot of these type of skills that historically we could only access if we went to a therapist. And now we're seeing this like great boon, this burst of like self-help through podcasts and books and worksheets and workbooks that are teaching these skills,
Mm.
right? And so what digital health does, and digital mental health was one of the last things that took on technology. So like finance became fintech, and all these other areas of our life, like food, automation, delivery, restaurant menus, right?
Uh-huh.
Mental health care was like one of the last ones because therapists were very particular about data and protecting data, which rightfully, right?
Yeah.
And HIPAA compliance and safety of clients who are not in the room with you if they suddenly have some kind of like issue happen. So digital health, mental health, I guess to answer your question, is just we all have phones, we all have access to internet. And if we can access this information through different channels, it just makes it easier. It gives us more knowledge. And so that's really what I meant by that.
Yeah. Do you think that it is as effective? I'm asking this because, as a leadership coach, the pandemic really was the shift where I had to do it virtually. And for a while, I was a staunch believer of no, like coaching works best in person and you build the chemistry and the trust and all of that stuff. That
Hmm.
is totally can also be done virtually from my experience now. And I'm a huge believer of virtual coaching. So, do you think that's also as effective digitally?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am for sure. Like the research has shown that there's not a very significant difference in outcomes for treatment, whether it's virtual or in person. I think some things are better suited for in person, for sure. High acuity cases, people's preference. If you have like severe multiple mental health issues, I think those things require someone in person. Or if you're working with somebody who has social anxiety, getting them out of the house and becomes like experiential, right? That's beneficial. But by and large, across the board, the outcomes are not significantly different. I think we have adapted really well as therapists and how to create rapport and trust and the therapeutic alliance with our clients over a virtual environment. And there's a lot of pros to it. People can access therapy much easier now. Why? Because they don't have to commute back and forth.
Yeah.
So I have clients who log in during their lunch hour. I have busy parents who really just have this 45-minute block between some situation that their kids are doing where they can have a session at home. And it's just become more integrated into our lives. But then there's also cons. If you don't have a private space, like we saw that in the pandemic, a lot of young people had moved back in with their parents. They didn't have privacy. They couldn't do therapy because there was no space for them to do it. So, I mean, like everything, it has a pro and con, but I think overall it has had a very positive effect on the industry for people, for patients.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you on there are more upsides than downsides to this. So you made that
Mhm.
distinction for people and patients. Why not? Is there another, there's not more pro? Is it for the mental therapists?
Oh, I wanted to really hone in on the patients piece because ultimately they're the ones who need to benefit the most from
Yeah.
anything that we build.
Ah,
And then when we, of course, like when we're building products or whatever, or services, the primary consumer is the patient
mhm.
user. That's our priority. The secondary consumer is the provider because we want to make it easy for them. We want to give them tools. And now with AI, like we want to make sure that they're supported and they can do their work at the best possible pace and they can utilize technology to make their work easier. Absolutely. And so virtual has allowed therapists to diversify their income streams, right? Before therapists, because they worked in one place physically, if they only had 4 clients at that practice and they had an ability to support 10 clients, they were just sitting around for 6 hours doing admin work or whatever, not
Right.
getting paid. But now, if they do virtual, they can work in these multiple places and fill up their caseloads to full capacity. So it becomes a better income stream for people.
Yeah, I would agree. There's so many upsides and how technology is allowing us and providing access to your point. And also, by the way, that requires that for me, I'll speak for myself as a coach that I didn't burn myself out, which I did through the pandemic. There was so much because technology allowed me to be on.
Mm,
Or by the end of, gosh, 2 years of doing that virtually, I was like, really, talk about burnout. I was like, oh, I need a whole 6 months of just not doing this the way that I was. So I think it's
yeah,
getting back to the whole like productivity piece can be sneaky because technology does allow us to be productive. And we have to
yeah.
be so mindful of how we use it and make sure that we don't burn out in the process.
I would agree with that because that's where your own boundaries are really important. Like your own boundaries, understanding of it, a regular overview or auditing of your commitments, like that's really important. And then understanding that you need to use your calendar in a more efficient way. A lot of times we think that efficiency means back-to-back stuff and like slotting things here and there. Efficient calendar use for me for healthy productivity is having buffer time between meetings. I don't think anybody ever needs a 60-minute meeting
Mhm.
unless you're doing a 60-minute therapy session. Making sure you streamline stuff like 25-minute meetings, 50-minute meetings, giving your buffer time, making sure you don't have too many calls a day as a therapist. You shouldn't be having more than 5 sessions a day. That's too much emotional overload. That's almost 6.5 hours of work. So, like thinking about your calendar efficiently, not just trying to maximize it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole concept of being in service has shifted for me. And this is all of the boundary learning for myself, like reaffirming my boundaries. What even are they? Let's start there. What even are my boundaries and how do I
Yeah,
enact it has been such a like learning and action for me over the past 5 years, especially as post-divorce. There was something where I really had to just relearn myself and undo habits that no longer were a part of me and who I wanted to be. Yeah.
mm,
What are your boundaries?
yeah. My boundaries, I don't do a lot of calls on Mondays. Monday and Friday, I try to keep meeting free as much as possible. I think that just helps me organize myself, close out the week, open the week, like all that kind of stuff. I definitely don't work after 6 p.m. regularly. If something is happening, sure, I will do what I need to do. it's not going to exceptional for me. It's not a rule that I have to work after hours. I definitely take time off. And I understand that my productivity is seasonal. That's been my biggest learning in the last 2 years,
Oh, tell me
is
more.
that there's seasons in my life where I need to like be really running at the deadline. Like when the book launch was happening, 12 weeks prior to book launch, I was like, I can't even tell you the speed I was at. It was like 3x.
Oh, I
You know,
get
there was no, oh no calls on Mondays, or if a pitch is coming through at 8 p.m., I will respond to that pitch because I want that press for my book. But I knew that it was seasonal. And I knew that right when the book came out, like 2 weeks after that, I was off, and I was off for a whole month. I did not tap into doing a book tour right after because I knew that leading up to the book, I was doing so much. Like 12 weeks is a long time to be working like two jobs at a hyper speed. And that's what it felt like because I was doing so much. I was a very involved author in my launch. Even though I had a publisher and a publicist and event team, like I had everything set, but I was really involved. And I
it.
have no regrets about that, but I had a boundary on it. I was like, once this ends, I'm off for a whole month. And I was. Like I did not do a single book thing in the whole month of December.
Yeah.
And so like that's what I mean by seasonal. It makes it so much better because overworking, if that's your rule, then you will burn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if overworking is exceptional to life circumstances as things happen, then you can tap into resilience.
That was such a huge
Yeah.
learning for me. And this is for our listeners. Israa and I were talking about books, and as a fellow author, I hadn't learned that the seasonality aspect of it. I shared with you, gosh, I feel like just this month is when I came up for air because it was such the longest sprint with book and also speaking and work. And I happen to just love writing. And so I was doing that too on top of everything else, and also my day job and my children's. The boundaries piece and the seasonality piece, of which I talk about in my first book, it's such a continual relearning. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, like, what were you relearning or reaffirming as you wrote the book, Toxic Productivity?
I was unlearning a lot. Like this whole idea around having limitations and boundaries of when you're doing things, creating a system to support your resilience. Like I didn't really have that before. I was very much say yes to everything, do it all the time. Let's go. There's only one speed and it's fast. And so I'm very well suited for the startup environment, but it's not healthy, right? And so I had to unlearn a lot of that because writing a book is like a marathon. And I wrote this book 3 times, 3 different ways, start to finish, right? Because every draft was so different. Yeah, I didn't work the same draft over and over again. I had to actually write it again, just based on the feedback I was getting. Because this is the first time I'm writing a book, right? I write short form pieces and like essays. I had never written a long form narrative. So, in order to do my best work, I realized more and more how destructive my foundational habits were. The not being able to identify and manage anxiety. In undergrad, I was a really good student, right? But I had this idea in my head that I do my best work under pressure. And a lot of high achieving students think that they're like, oh, I'm going to push this off for the last 3 days before the essay is due because I do my best work under pressure. So
Yeah.
many students think that. And it's because we're procrastinating from our anxiety. We have anxiety about the thing. So we're procrastinating, and then we end up believing that, oh, I do my best work at the last moment. And then it becomes reinforced because you're a high achiever, you end up getting a good grade. So I operated under that, but I couldn't last minute a 60,000 word manuscript. And so I was just unlearning a lot of these things I believed about myself. So much of my writing process was me just lying on the ground, thinking, just like thinking. But that's like not a good use of time, quote unquote, if you're like in the hustle mindset. It's wasting time. A lot of my writing days were I would write for 5 hours and 80% of it would be trash, unusable, right? And
Mhm.
so then I would get so hard on myself and be like, damn, Isra, you wasted a day. Like you wrote 47 pages and only 2 pages of them are actually good that's going in the manuscript. You wasted it. But I had to reframe that I actually had to write those 47 pages for those 2 pages to be good. And that's the writing process. That's the drafting process. And ultimately, I have a whole 80,000 words that's sitting that didn't make it into the book at all. But I have all this information that I can pull to make workbooks from and blah, blah, blah. So like I had to reframe so much around the utilitarian relationship with time and outcome. That was a big learning for me in my first 2 years of writing, or I would say my first year, draft and a half.
Preach, sister. I am the queen of reframe, which
Uh-huh.
it's so powerful. And I love what you said about unlearning through this process. So it's funny, it's like some of the clients that I coach say to themselves, like, no, like that inner critic, that harsh voice allows me to achieve things, which is similar to your example of, dang it, waiting till the last minute because performance goes,
Mhm.
whatever story you have made up around it. So many
Mhm.
are tied to these stories that we think we need to be hyper productive or productive. And that undoing part, that is so hard. My question is like, how does a person start the undoing of a narrative or something that isn't helpful?
Yeah. The first is to identify it and become aware that this is the narrative you believe. Because a lot of times we believe narratives, but we don't recognize that they're actually external to us. We just, oh, this is just who I am. This is just how I am. I
Yeah.
have always been this way. But the reality is it's a narrative that you believe, right? So it's separate from you. So first it's identifying that. Second is actually taking a very critical look at whether it's true that this narrative has served you, right? And so that's like perspective taking. So if you take my example, I had the narrative that I do my best work under pressure. But if I were to actually go back and look at those times in undergrad when I was behaving this way, I was miserable. I wasn't eating. I remember I once pulled like a 3 night all-nighter. Now at
Oh my
37,
God.
I'm like, that would kill me. It would kill me. I would die if I was up for 3 days, right?
Yes.
But it's unhealthy. What was my mental state like at that time? I was anxious, I was panicking. So is it actually serving me? Is this narrative actually like what I believe? Is it actually genuinely making me successful? Or is it just giving me one aspect of success? So it's like taking a critical look at the truth of the narrative. And the third is if the outcome is what you want, then we cannot be married to the process. And so, if you are getting an outcome by behaving a certain way and you believe that this is the only way I can get there, let's start thinking about alternative paths to getting the same outcome. Are other ways true where you can get the same thing? So, I hear this a lot from people who are ambitious, right? They're like, why would I want to start resting? Why would I make rest a part of my productivity right now? Because working hard and over functioning has gotten me the promotion, it got me the salary, it got me the house. Like,
Yep.
why are you telling me to get rid of these things? So let's take a look at what are the alternative pathways that you can take in life in order to continue to get this level of success. A lot of times we've never actually examined alternatives.
Yeah.
We just believe the thing that works and we continue. And so there's that. So it's like this, like it's a stepped process and it requires patience with yourself. It requires time to give yourself, right? To start believing other things are true. And then it also actually, interestingly, requires you to question why you want the outcomes you want. Why do you want
Yes.
the thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that has been very transformative for me as well. I have really had to confront with a lot of things that I want and just wonder why it is that I want them. Because in order to be sustainably productive across a long period of time, a lot of times people think that my book is anti-productivity. It's not. It's actually a book to make you more productive, but in a healthier, sustainable way. When
Huh.
we are toxically productive, we're trying to do too much, we can really only tolerate it in spurts and then we burn out and we spend a lot of time trying to recover. You talked about it, it happened with you, it happened with me. And so, how can we actually make healthy productivity a part of our overall life? That requires you to really understand what you want to pursue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have a very crystal clear understanding of what you want to pursue, how you get there and who else is doing what become irrelevant.
Oh,
Like when we're in this hustle mindset, we are very much tied to a path because we're like how I get there is just as important as what I want. But that's actually not true.
Mhm.
A lot of people are like, I need to write a book. I need to write a book. I want to write a book. I must write a book because why? If your mission is to share things with people, there is multiple avenues to getting that out there. You don't
Mm.
have to write a book. You could do a podcast, you could write a newsletter, you could become a speaker, you could do a course. There's so many other avenues.
Yeah.
So what is really your mission? And that can give you so much clarity about what you do and how you do it and how long you do it.
Yeah, and I think part of that is really identifying the values. And I think the reason why I talk about values so much is that it helps inform why you do things, what you prioritize, and or where all of these things are misaligned. And I think if we can get what you said about curiosity, and by the way, like I think we need to make patience, the virtue of patience, go viral again because
Mm,
it's as an example, my oldest injured himself during a track and field event. And I hope he doesn't hear this.
mm.
He's gonna be like, why are you talking about me? However, you know, the healing process takes time. Like he fractured his elbow and another bone in his dominant hand, both on his dominant hand and his knee. And I can see, even if he wasn't saying it, how frustrating it was for him. And one of the questions I asked him last night was, what are you learning through this process about yourself or just this process of healing? And he said, it takes patience. And I said, yes, love, it takes patience. Everything is so quick, or it
Mm,
seems, and it seems magical. Everything is at our finger and at the ready. And we forget that healing, that work around how we align ourselves, and is it actually what we want to do? It takes time and curiosity, which I love that you said, curiosity about ourselves and why we do the things we do. These are like
mhm.
fundamental.
They're fundamental, but they are not something that we are ever encouraged to do.
Yeah, it's true. I can see tides changing, at least in the school system, with some of the schools really teaching them about like mindset and emotional regulation.
Hmm.
And the conversation around self-care is more and more there than certainly for me was I was like, what? I didn't learn self-care or what that meant for me until my
Yes.
adulthood.
Yeah.
So I am very hopeful in that the other younger generations are learning how to emotionally regulate themselves much earlier than you and I ever did.
Yeah, completely. My friends who have children who are like in kindergarten, they are learning how to identify what emotions feel like in their body. Like they're literally like 4 or 5 years old, or they do these affirmations in the morning. And so it's definitely happening. And this is a little bit of a side note, but this is also why I think there's this like interesting friction we're seeing in the workplace between generations right now, because
Oh,
you've got one generation is who is in management who was not at all versed in emotional regulation or emotional management. Then you've got the middle layer, which is the millennials who are like they grew up in the hustle culture with a little bit of emotional awareness. Then you've got Gen Z who very much has a lot of emotional knowledge and awareness. They know how to set boundaries. So you're seeing this friction between these three generations who think about boundaries and emotions in the workplace so differently.
yeah. Yeah, I feel it from the managers who tell me about these challenging situations. I want to do a little bit of a pivot because I've been very intrigued by some of your posts recently around the soft life.
Mm,
So I've heard it here and there, and for me, it's interesting because I'm like, okay, what does that look like for me? And I happen to also be in the season where I'm doing a little bit of a sabbatical because of all of
hmm.
the sprints that I've been doing for way too long.
Okay.
It resonated for me. You've put up like myths about soft life or kind of interesting posts. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so the soft life is like this interesting like pop culture phenomenon that broke through the internet last year. And it's essentially it started with this notion of rejecting hustle culture and all of that. And I think that somewhere along the way it became political, and then somewhere along the way it became aligned with this trad wife trend. So whenever I talk about it, I really want to be clear about what I'm saying when it comes to the soft life. When I talk about the soft life, I talk about it from a agency, like choice perspective and an intentionality perspective. To me, the soft life is not quitting your job and making butter, because you could be really dysregulated doing that,
Mhm.
right? You could have a lot of pressure just to do that. But like sometimes on the internet, that's how it's like shown, aligning with this like trad wife, right? Conservative, traditional gender roles. That's not what I'm saying at all. I do want to say that very clearly. The soft life really is intentional choices about where your energy is being spent and making sure that you have time in your calendar to put that energy back into yourself. It is understimulating your brain. So right now our brains are overstimulated.
Yep.
So it's leaning to more analog, slow process activities, because right now we are very primed for fast turnaround. People don't even read articles anymore. They're just reading the headlines,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Everything is immediate. If I want something, I can order it like now and it'll arrive at my doorstep in 4 hours,
Exactly.
sometimes even less. So the soft life is about extending that gap between desire and achieving and knowing to sit in that. And the soft life is about community. It's inconveniencing yourself to be in community with other people and appreciating that present moment that you have, not in comparison, not looking at the past, not looking at the future. And it's really being connected to your internal state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for making those distinctions. It resonates with me deeply around agency and having and making intentional choices is such a distinction. And what you said here about being in community and inconveniencing ourselves, which I think anecdotally we've convenienced ourselves so much that we are out of touch with community,
Yeah.
what used to make us help us feel grounded and a part of something bigger and perhaps even give us meaning in life. I don't know. I'm pulling a lot of threads there, but I do think there's some ties. So I love that
Oh my gosh.
yeah, does that resonate
Sorry.
with you?
Yes. I was like, yes. It definitely resonates with me hugely. I actually wrote a Substack about it 2 weeks ago, and I don't have a very large Substack following. Substack is like a newsletter platform, but it just exploded. Like the article went viral on Substack, which I don't even know how that happened because I don't know the Substack algorithm. I essentially write for myself. But the
That's
article,
magic.
it's essentially called A Good Life is Inconvenient. And then I go on to elaborate on all of these things that you just talked about. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it is true. Like we're so convenienced that we actually don't have the skills to tolerate. There's this concept in psychology called distress tolerance. And distress tolerance is a really important life skill. But if you remove all distress from your life, then you don't know how to tolerate it at all. And so inadvertently, you get distressed and you completely crash out. You have no idea what to do, right? And sometimes the soft life is co opted as a way to actually avoid inconvenience. So there's like this really interesting dynamic at play. Like people want to avoid a difficult conversation with someone and they'll ghost that person and say, oh, I'm just protecting my peace because I'm in my soft life era. That's not true. You can't avoid difficult conversations and say you're in the soft life. So people are just taking these concepts and like making it whatever they want it to be. But it's really important to be grounded in the truth of what these terms actually mean and what they look like in your life.
Boy, I'm sitting with it like everything that is just hitting me. And yeah, it is. There's another study that I am recalling about patience and deferring reward. It's with children, and I might be butchering the study.
Hmm.
The marshmallow
The
study?
marshmallow, yeah.
Yeah, where in essence they showed that when you can defer like the reward of getting the marshmallow between the task and the reward, they somehow were able to see longitudinally, like later in life, that they had more, I don't know, you fill in the blank here, Isra. Do you know the study?
Yeah, I know the study. It was like an impulse control study, and the results were like you could predict success in life, how successful a kid will be over time if they're able to control their impulses. And the impulse is like to immediately get gratification right now versus delaying it for later. So it's like a delay of gratification.
Yeah.
A study is like seminal. If they talk about it all the time. What is interesting is a bunch of researchers went back to the study 2 years or 5 years ago, and they essentially did this like retroactive analysis on it. And what was interesting, they found, and I'll send you the article because I think it's so fascinating about this whole thing, is that there was this intersection of socioeconomic status on which child was better able to delay versus not delay impulse control. And so it's like there's this interesting, another added element that the original researchers just didn't look at. It's very interesting. If you grow up in a high stress environment, where there's a lot of chaos and instability, and maybe you don't really know if food is going to come next. So you develop a scarcity mindset, which a lot of Asian immigrants have.
Hello, me
Um,
raising my hand.
yeah, yeah, same. You are not able to delay that gratification because you don't know if you're going to get it again. So it's like this interesting interplay between these things that, so it's not as clear if the connection is just delaying gratification or is it the scarcity trauma. Like it's just like a very interesting thing. But I think there is some truth to the delaying of gratification, 100%.
Yeah, it is very layered. It is hard to tease apart. And I don't think we can deny that as well. We live in such a dopaminergic, like instant everything. So I love this distinction about the soft life, going back to that. And one of the things, as we're winding down this conversation, Israa, I could talk to you forever, honestly, like geeking out on all the research and all the things that you share, is that you said you love slow and quiet mornings, and I do too. Like, honestly, there's nothing more joyful to me to have a slow start. And I just think it's such a luxury to have a slow start and just sit there with my tea or coffee and be with myself. How do you marinate in your slow, quiet mornings?
Yeah, so I think starting my day off from a place of grounding and intention was transformational to my life. And I know that sounds so trite and it's like, how can that be? But it actually is true.
Mm.
Because I used to just begin my day in a scramble,
Mhm.
completely just like scrambling around. But now it's like being able to just sit. And a lot of times people think that your morning, in order to be intentional, has to be packed with all of these like wellness activities. Like you have to journal and meditate and morning pages and light a candle and blah, blah. You don't have to do any of that. You just have to sit with yourself. So whether you like listen to music or not, you can definitely do that. But try not to like get on your phone right away, whether it's check emails or text messages or social media. Definitely not read the news because
Yeah.
that will spike your stress hormone. Read it later, that's fine. And then like having just like breakfast before getting the workday started. It's only like a 15-minute thing. It doesn't have to be very long.
Yeah.
But it just helps me feel so much more grounded. And when I don't do it, I feel the difference.
Oh my gosh, me too. You know what I do? A slow morning start for me is once the kids are at school, I come back home and I stretch. I'm at the age now, Israel. To turn 50 later in the year. So I need to do, and I just relish in, and I don't rush through the stretches. I give myself
Hmm.
time to just be there with my body and breathe because I used to hold my breath a lot through things. And thank you for sharing how you marinate in that. And my last question for you is, how do you define what it means to be a modern Asian female?
Oh, that is an interesting question. Let me think about this. No one has ever asked me this.
Look at that, Israel. I'm stumped.
I am stumped. I'm usually somebody who is very chatty, as I'm sure you've noticed. Okay. What comes to mind? My first raw, unfiltered, you're getting this
Yes, I love it. Go
peek
there.
into my brain. The first thing that just came to my mind is you define your own traditions. I don't know why that came to my mind. I'm sure if I unpacked it, I would come up with more details. But I think that I have pretty non traditional life choices compared to other South Asian Muslim people. The biggest being I'm child free by choice, which is a big departure for my culture. And so over time, I think one thing that I have genuinely felt across like my 20s and my 30s is that culture is very important. Culture is very powerful and influential, but ultimately, culture is made up.
Mm.
Someone somewhere made up a bunch of things that we continue to do and celebrate and identify with, right? It gives us grounding and rootedness. And I'm very connected with my culture, but ultimately, it is made up. And so, in order to help culture continue to evolve, like we are allowed to break out of things that don't necessarily benefit or serve us, just us as one person, and we're allowed to redefine traditions and cultural norms within our own family units and still be a part of the culture. I
Mm.
think a lot of times people see you and they think that culture is binary. Oh, if you do this, you're Asian. If you don't do this, you're not Asian. Like Asian people do this, non-Asian people don't do this. Asian women are this way and non-Asian women are that way. I get a lot of, oh my gosh, you're Muslim and you seem so outspoken and wow, like you don't wear a hijab and all of these like interesting stereotypes that people put on you because they want to put you in a box because
Yeah.
it makes them easier to deal with you because they don't have to do more work. And so to me, like I don't believe culture is binary and I believe that we define our own traditions and we get to choose the pieces of our culture that we find the most joy in and we get to leave behind the stuff that we don't find a lot of joy in and it still keeps us connected to our culture.
Look at that. I think you did a fine job of defining it. And what I heard loud and clear is the theme of choice and agency. There you have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So as a modern Asian female, I live my life with a lot of choice and agency.
Oh my God, mic drop right there. This whole conversation is what lit me up. So thank you for being in conversation with me.
Thank you. Thank you for the last question. I'm definitely going to ponder on this more.
Yeah, and if you write on that, will you just let me know?
Yeah, I will. And I'll send you the other Substack too about the inconvenience thing. You can read it on a Sunday morning. But yeah.
While I'm stretching, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No multitasking. You are
Oh,
stretching, you are in it, you are enjoying your stretches. You are not listening to me talk.
okay, girl, I need you in my pocket. Thank you. I love stumping people with that question of how one defines what it means to be a modern Asian female and Isra's essence of that around having agency and having intentional energy and thought and decision making really resonates with me. I think she did really well defining that. I hope you really enjoyed our meandering in this conversation. There were so many meaty topics I wanted to unpack with Isra, especially around her book, Toxic Productivity. And I saw myself in a lot of she shared about what drives this behavior. I know it does for a lot of the high achieving women that I get to coach and have the honor of coaching. So I have a lot of reflection questions for you. The first one is get curious about your relationship with hyperproductivity and what is that relationship? We talked a lot about this in regard to her book and what she shared that what's driving this behavior of toxic productivity is ultimately unresolved emotions, right? The emotions of shame, of guilt, of the fear of being left behind, all of the emotions that come with comparison. These are really big and heavy emotions that so many don't want to look at, which ends up driving toxic productivity. So, what's your relationship with productivity? And get curious about that. And that's a word that I just love because it allows us to open up the aperture because when you get curious, you explore what's possible and what's underneath. So, following the theme of getting curious, the second question I have for you is get curious about your boundaries. Let's start with do you have any? And for me, I know I had to really uncover, rediscover what my boundaries are and were, or what I want them to be in this season of my life. And I do think that boundaries shift. I do think that in different seasons of our lives, it calls for different boundaries. So really get curious about your boundaries and maybe write some thoughts around what are those current boundaries and do any of those need to shift? And then I loved that we talked about seasons. It is something that I write really explicitly about in my first book, Mommy Tracked, how to take authentic risks and find success on your terms, exclusively on Amazon. And the season concept I love because we all weave in and out of different seasons of our lives. One might be a season of really doing a lot of work, and then another season might call in really focusing in on different aspects of your life. Maybe it's your wellness, maybe it's family members that you need to take care of. So tying that together with the season that you're in or getting curious about the season that you're in, and then marrying that with getting curious about your boundaries. So reflect on that. And another central theme that we unpacked in our conversation is about the unlearning. Isra shared that the book journey for her really helped her get curious about her habits, her thinking, and her relationship with productivity, and unlearning a lot of the good girl behaviors. By that, I mean things like perfectionism and really driving yourself to quote unquote excellence. And so get curious about habits and ways of thinking that you have to unlearn. What are those aspects that you have to unlearn? So, some really meaty reflection questions for you based on big topics that Isra and I explored and unpacked. And as I shared, Isra is a psychotherapist, she's a speaker, and the author of the book that we talked about, Toxic Productivity: Reclaim Your Time and Emotional Energy in a World That Always Demands More. She's also the founder of Well Guide, which is a mental health platform, and we talked about this in depth. And she has over 350,000 followers. Clearly, her work resonates, right? She helps people untangle their self-worth from the pressures of constant achievement. And her work sits at the intersection of psychology, culture, and digital wellness, blending clinical insight with grounded, compassionate guidance. You can find her on Instagram under Well Guide. And if you're interested in reading more about the different articles or just this topic that she talks about around constant achievement, she has been featured in Time, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and she speaks at many events, of which you will find on her website and on Instagram as well. Man, I really could have talked for another hour with Isra, because it is all of the things that we meandered through are topics that are so near and dear to my heart and of the high achieving women that I work with. So I hope you found this episode resonant and that it helped unlock for you some areas that you want to reflect on and dive deeper into for yourself. My mission is really to bring into conversation with me people that have really unique perspectives, unique lived experiences. And the interesting thing is that while they are uniquely themselves, we all have so much that ties us together. And I think that's the beauty. That is the beauty of being in conversation in a really deep, present way, is knowing that we're all so much more connected than we are different. So if you loved this conversation, please do share it with 3 of your friends and leave me a review. I read every single one of them, and it is my mission to bring stories to life that we all need to hear, because it's through these stories that we can think about other possibilities and reflect so that we have more choice and agency moving forward. Until next time, join me for the next conversation.